Hello everybody, and welcome to a discussion we're about to have at the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation about IBD, and IBD specifically diagnosed and treated in people 60 years old and older. As some of you may already know, there are approximately 3 million Americans that are battling either Crohn's or colitis, and IBD can affect anybody, regardless of age or race or ethnicity or sexual orientation or gender. IBD is often thought of as an invisible disease, meaning on the outside it may not appear that people are sick or battling with the disease and its symptoms, but on the inside they might be struggling significantly and therefore can be invisible to many people on the outside. We talk a lot about IBD impacting kids and teens and adults, but what is less frequently discussed is the fact that there's a growing occurrence of IBD among people who are 60 and older. And as I said before, that's the topic of discussion today. In fact, as many as 16% of cases of IBD are diagnosed in people 60 or older. So I'm pleased to be joined today by a very distinguished panel of folks. Dr. Brent Polk is the chair of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's National Scientific Advisory Committee. Laura Wingate is the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's Senior Vice President of Education, Support, and Advocacy. And we are joined by Jean Davis, who is an ulcerative colitis patient. Jean was diagnosed with UC just 11 months ago at the age of 67. So thank you all for joining us today. And over the next 30 minutes, we are going to discuss IBD among older adults and specifically the psychosocial impact of the diseases. So if you're watching, please chime in, say hi in the comments section, and join this discussion. So we're going to get started with our conversation. So we're going to begin with Jean. And Jean, it would be helpful if you could tell the group, the audience, a little bit about your disease journey thus far. And we're specifically interested in what happened when you first started to experience symptoms, and what was that like for you? So.
Okay, thanks, Michael. My first indication that something was going wrong was back in May of 2017, and I noticed that there was blood showing up in the toilet, and of course that was very alarming to me because of what you hear about the possibility of cancer, and I had a grandfather who died of colon cancer. So I immediately sought medical advice on that. Went to my colon rectal doctor, who just in March had performed a colonoscopy on me, and I got thumbs up clear, on that. So I was wondering, what happened? Did he miss something, or did something appear in that short period of time? His diagnosis at the time, after examining me, was internal hemorrhoid. And he prescribed some medication which my insurance company would not cover. It was very expensive. Ultimately, after trying different things, he told me to use over-the-counter preparation H suppositories. I used those for treatment, and after a period of weeks, the bleeding disappeared. So I thought I was over the hill with that, and things were going back to normal. But then in December of 2017, after we had just gotten the word that our youngest grandson had been transferred to ICU, very critical, we went to help our son and daughter-in-law take care of our other 3 grandchildren, and the day after arriving there, things started happening again, where blood was showing up. I started having diarrhea, and I thought, okay, what kind of virus, did I encounter, or, what's happening? Is it some food I ate? But when it continued to get worse and more intense, and was starting to impact the way I was feeling and the level of energy, with my wife urging me, I got an appointment with the same colon rectal doctor and told him what was going on. He listened to me, and then he did an internal exam and came to the same conclusion he had arrived at back in May of the previous year. And he sent me away, not with any kind of satisfactory answers. And my wife and I, after having done some research before the appointment, even brought up the question about IBS or IBD, and he discounted those thoughts and said he did not believe that they were either one. Well, because we walked away with unsatisfactory outcomes, we then got a recommendation from my family doctor, a gastroenterologist, a local gastro, and went to him. Of course, it takes 2.5 weeks to get in there, and he diagnosed it after listening to me, and he did a flexible SIG scope, and he said, you have ulcerative colitis. So he immediately put me on medication for that, including prednisone, and from there, within the matter of several weeks, it started to calm, and I began to feel a little more normal. But over that period of time, I lost a lot of weight. I've lost close to 26 pounds as a result, but I'm back to more normal energy level, and my weight has stabilized.
Thank you for sharing all of that with us. We appreciate it. And I think my next question, if it's okay with you, is really for Dr. Polk, because it would be helpful maybe for the audience to understand how common or not is the misdiagnosis that Jean has shared with us, and that kind of delay from symptoms to actual diagnosis.
Yeah, misdiagnosis or delay is very common in IBD. The average time from the time a patient first experiences a symptom to actually getting diagnosed is 6 months. And as Jean brought up, irritable bowel syndrome or spastic colon are frequently attributed to the types of symptoms that patients are having. For the source of the bleeding is frequently ascribed to or attributed to patients having internal hemorrhoids or other source of bleeding, fissures or tears. And the investigation to really define that somebody has inflammatory bowel disease can be often delayed weeks or months. So it's not uncommon for that to occur.
Can you help us all understand why that's particularly bad in a disease like inflammatory bowel diseases?
Yes, so one of the common symptoms for patients with inflammatory bowel disease is malnutrition and weight loss. And as Jean pointed out, he had lost 26 pounds. So that alone is a significant contributor to poor overall health and well-being. Other symptoms that patients have with their IBD may be sleep disturbance, depression, anxiety, and those are continuing to go on while someone remains undiagnosed. Specific to the intestine, frequently there's scar tissue that is developing while patients are not getting treated. And from a psychosocial standpoint, not having a diagnosis or a cause to explain your symptoms creates anxiety and stress in families as well as for patients. So all of those add up to important reasons to get a diagnosis. Of course, we want to have a diagnosis so that we can begin appropriate treatment.
And just to interject
Sure.
I was told that if it went untreated too long, the ulcers, could actually result in a perforated colon. Of course, that takes you to the next level of, treatment.
Indeed. So the longer people go undiagnosed, the more dangerous it is, I think, is the conclusion, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
likely develop complications.
Mm-hmm. So, Jean, you said that you mentioned to your initial doctor that it might be IBS or IBD. Did you know about Crohn's and colitis before your diagnosis? Was there anybody else in your family that had been diagnosed with the disease? Or
I knew very little
Mhm.
about those two diseases before this happened to me. My wife, who is a very diligent patient advocate,
helpful to have those
Yes.
around.
she goes to the website as soon as she is looking for answers, and she was able to find out a lot, on there. And of course, there's a lot out there from the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. And so, based on my symptoms and matching them up with symptoms described, that she found, and not being a medical person, she suspected, but we were hoping to get that confirmed. And when we were just kind of shrugged off, and it was almost like the doctor didn't appreciate being questioned, like having someone come in, from outside already informed. So it's not.
And when you finally got the real diagnosis, what was your reaction to that? How did you feel when you got that diagnosis?
Well, once I got the real diagnosis, I felt like then we could start treatment, which, the gastroenterologist started me on treatment right away. And then other questions followed in my mind about what's this, what else should I be doing? What else do I need to know? How long will it take to get this under control? Is there any ultimate cure for this? What's it mean for my retirement? And what my plans are with my wife and my family and my 4 grandchildren. So, there were a lot of things swirling around, and of course, some of the stories, you do read, things can get bad quickly.
Yeah.
And so my question is, or at the time was, is this going to be me?
Yeah, you're pointing out that of course, on top of the physical challenges of the disease, it can be overwhelming in a wide variety of ways. And so actually, my next question is really for Laura, because it's not just in older adults, but really people of any age are dealing with the mental impact of this disease. So can you talk a little bit about those particular psychosocial issues that are common for patients?
Absolutely, and what Jean described is really quite common for patients. There's all these questions swirling around in a patient's head, and those questions, as Dr. Polk mentioned, can lead to stress, anxiety. The fear of the unknown and what's going to happen next can often lead to depression. You thankfully had a really wonderful support system in your wife and an advocate, as you said, but some patients don't feel comfortable sharing what they're experiencing, and they might not have that support network, so they may feel isolated and alone, which then compounds the anxiety and the depression that can be experienced. But the thing that's important for all of us to understand is that's part of the journey with inflammatory bowel disease, and that these are normal experiences. And what I hope the foundation is here to do is help people like Jean get those resources that can help navigate that experience and help decrease the stress and anxiety and give reassurance and information about the disease course, and then connect to other patients who've walked in a similar path that can help you and your wife navigate this experience.
Very helpful. And Jean, you actually mentioned specifically how it may or may not impact your retirement. And so if you're comfortable, I'm curious, think we'd all be curious to hear, how did it impact your plans for retirement, and did it have an effect?
Well, initially, when it was during the flare-up stage, when things were pretty intense, and I needed to be very close to a bathroom, and was having accidents periodically. That put a damper to some things, and we actually had to cancel a trip planned with some friends in February. That was before I got a diagnosis. And so that's one example of what it does.
Sure.
We had a trip, 11-day trip out west planned in May. I was concerned, would we have to pull the plug on that? Fortunately, I had the diagnosis, was under treatment, and that was under control, by the time that trip took place. But one thing, it was pointed out to me, by my doctor that, because it's considered to be an autoimmune disease, I need to be extra careful, about exposure to other bacteria and viruses and that sort of thing. So once again, my wife took care of that and got, Clorox wipes, and we wiped down, the airplane, the bathroom, TV control. I mean, we did a pretty good, thorough cleaning. I should have left a tip for her, but it gets you thinking about those things that you kind of take for granted, and also you have to be more flexible. I'm looking to be more flexible as far as scheduling. I'm certainly more aware, of my fluctuations in my own bodily functions, and is this an indication that another flare-up is about to begin? I'm trying to be conscious of what foods may cause changes, even though I've been told there's no clear correlation to certain foods, but encouraged to eat a healthy diet, and so I'm trying to avoid as many processed foods, eat more fresh things, more fruits and vegetables and things like that. So it has impacted my retirement and some of the plans.
Dr. Paul, can you help the audience understand why exactly the disease, and maybe more importantly the treatments, create a situation where you have to be careful about infections and other challenges to your immune system?
Sure. Some of the most common medications that we use for patients with inflammatory bowel disease suppress the immune system. In fact, essentially all of the drugs that are used for treating ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease are targeted at decreasing immune responses, and those make individuals more susceptible to respiratory infections, sinus infections, and sometimes generally just a decrease in energy and overall feeling of well-being as a side effect of the medications and the suppression of the immune system.
Great. And Laura, will you help the audience understand a little bit more about what Jean was talking about in terms of diet and the information that does, or maybe more importantly doesn't yet exist,
Right.
and what we try to do to help population deal with that?
Yeah, diet and nutrition are really complex areas of inflammatory bowel disease, and one of the things the foundation is doing is we're actually doing research on the role diet plays, and hopefully we'll have some answers for you on a diet in the future. But while we're doing that research and trying to understand a very complex area of the body with the microbiome and the interaction of food, we really want to help educate patients about the role diet plays, the role malnutrition plays in the experience of inflammatory bowel disease. We have a number of resources on our website that include everything from, the common diets that patients try, including the specific carbohydrate diet, the paleo diet, information about enteral nutrition and other forms of therapy that might help supplement the treatment that's going on, and just general information about the importance of food blogging and logging in what you're eating, because you're right, there's no one diet yet for inflammatory bowel disease, but there are foods that might trigger more symptoms in a patient, and knowing what your trigger foods might be can help you manage your disease more appropriately. So those are all resources that are available through the foundation to be utilized in conjunction with working with your healthcare provider.
Okay. Thank you.
So Dr. Polk, will you talk a little bit about why it's important for patients to address the mental challenges of the disease in addition to the physical challenges of the disease as they figure out the right treatment plan for themselves?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we're beginning to understand is the strength of that mind-body connection that occurs in essentially all diseases, and in particular in inflammatory bowel disease. We know that some of the side effects that really may be involved with the disease activity include sleep disorders, depression, increases in anxiety, and notices and changes in mood and behavior. Gene mentioned he was on prednisone, inducing in the period when you were trying to get to remission early on in your disease, and that drug in particular is known to actually affect mood, sleep, anxiety, and we had the chance to in fact talk about that. As we learn more about anxiety and depression and sleep disturbance, we're beginning to understand that for some patients that may be an indication that in fact their disease is coming back into activity or beginning to experience what we call a flare.
And Laura, will you talk a little bit about the resources that exist for folks who are trying to address their psychosocial challenges?
Absolutely, and I think the foundation has a wealth of resources, and we're building more and more every day. It's really important that patients find their support network, whether that be through their partner or wife like you did, but also the IBD community as a whole. So we have our IBD Help Center, which is here to answer questions and point patients and caregivers in the right direction where they can find resources. We host live support groups at our chapters where if you want to meet with other people in a roundtable-like discussion to share stories and share tips and tricks for managing the disease, the foundation offers that. We also have one-on-one support through a program called Power of Two, which is really great if somebody needs and wants to talk one-on-one with someone over phone or via the internet, Skype, and share a common journey and get information from another patient. And then, we really strive to make sure we're hitting how people want to engage in a variety of ways. So having Facebook support groups going on, having our Crohns and Colitis community, which is a moderated community, so no question that a patient poses or a caregiver poses is left unanswered. It's monitored by our IBD Help Center, and anyone can post a question, the community responds. We have different forums, we have physicians who actually post answers to questions on the community. So we're really trying to make sure we're reaching people where they want to be. And in December, I'm really thrilled to share that we're going to be launching some new resources that really address what Dr. Polk was talking about and what we've been talking about, the role stress, anxiety, depression play in inflammatory bowel disease, sharing some patient stories, sharing some tips and tricks from other patients through those stories on managing these issues, but also connecting out to other resources. When is it appropriate to engage your healthcare provider and psychosocial support resources like a psychiatrist, like a social worker who may be able to help with deeper issues. And we're really building a community of these resources that will be available, and we'll be adding more resources such as the role body image might play in the feeling of anxiety and stress and depression with inflammatory bowel disease. So that's a lot of resources that are coming, and as we understand the research that's being done on the mind-gut connection, we'll be adding more resources to address that as well over the course of the next year.
Great. So I do have a question for Jean, because you were talking about the fact that your grandson was in ICU and you were there assisting the situation and offering support, but that's an enormously stressful situation. I can only imagine.
Yes.
And it sounds like your symptoms worsened during that time. So I was just wondering if you want to talk at all about your experience thus far with the impact that stress or mental or emotional challenges are having on your disease.
Yes, I'm still trying to understand that aspect. Since I feel like I'm under control with regards to the colitis. I haven't had any kind of, intense flare-ups.
That's great.
Seems like it's, it's moderated, which I'm, very thankful for. But always wondering, when it might be coming back. I really do believe that, stress, has an impact on that disease, and it might have been a coincidence that extreme stress, is when it really, took place. But again, I also think that May episode, which appeared to be cured, was the first, indication of what was coming my way. But again, I think it's so important to, have that support network, of one form or another. Like Laura said, I am blessed to have, that in my, family and also in my friends. But, from my perspective, as a 67-year-old male, things happening earlier this year when the disease was at its worst. I mean, I've gone all my life, and the adult male is taught to be very much in control of things and work out a solution. And so to be in that uncontrolled situation, where I'm being governed by the disease itself, and I'm doing everything I can, and it doesn't seem to be helping. That really knocks you down a few pegs, and you got to climb back up. And fortunately, with my support, that's helped me develop a commitment to doing what I'm supposed to be doing, to control it. And I want to have my energy back. I want to be able to do things, play with my 11, 9, 7, and 2-year-old grandchildren, and not just sit in a chair, only play for a while and then have to take a nap. So I want to be active. So they all provide incentive for me to do the right thing, and with the help of the foundation and others, I can find out what is the right thing, and I'd like to know when that changes, and I should change what I'm doing as well.
That's great. I can't imagine better motivation to fully enjoy your retirement and make the most of it. And I think the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation, the IBD community at large, is dedicated to creating all the resources that you need to have the disease be entirely under control and not get in the way of your quality of life and fully enjoying your retirement. So we are just about out of time, but I just wanted to ask any of the three of you if there were other things you wanted to share or comments you wanted to make before we wrap up. I welcome it.
Just, kind of to wrap up my perspective, because prior to this happening to me, I knew very little, about IBD. I had one friend, with Crohn's, but even there, she didn't really share a lot. I didn't know, the extent of, what she was dealing with. So I would try to be sensitive, but, I was ignorant when it came to knowing about it. And so, it really needs to be educated, communicated, which you're all about, and people need to know about it, and it needs to get to the medical community, because they're on the front line, helping people, and, you just can't have people suffering for extended periods of time. And I'd like to personally thank the foundation for all your help, the information, and also helping me get to meet Dr. Butra at the University of Penn. She educated me and has been such a help, in moving forward.
So glad to hear that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, and I also want to thank Jean for sharing his story, because there is such a need for more older adults to share their stories, because there are people who don't have the support system that you have, that are older and suffering with IBD. So Jean, I really want to thank you for being with us today and sharing your story and shedding light on the older adult population with inflammatory bowel disease. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank Gene as well and the foundation. Gene mentioned his experience in diagnosis and being prepared for questions with the physician and provider, and one of the things that I'd like to close with is advocating for patients to be empowered, recognize that they're on this journey, their provider is on the journey to help them, and to use the foundation resources to come prepared to ask questions and give pushback and think about second opinions and feel empowered to do so.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I want to thank the panel, all three of you. Thank you so much. And I just want to conclude by saying that this Saturday is the beginning of Crohn's and Colitis Awareness Week. It happens every year from December 1st through the 7th. We are going to be exploring specifically mental health in IBD patients, and if you want any additional information about mental health or any of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation's resources, please visit crohnscolitisfoundation.org. And if you have any questions about mental health or anything about IBD, please feel free to visit the IBD Help Center, and you can do that by either calling 888-MY-GUT-PAIN, or you can send an email to info@crohnscolitisfoundation.org. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thanks again to the panel. Have a great day.